Welcome to this episode of Safe Home Podcast for struggling teens and their families finding their healing path. I'm Beth Syverson, a mom of an 18-year-old son, Joey, who has been dealing with drug addiction, depression, anxiety, and suicidal ideation for several years. I'm walking beside him as he struggles with his recovery while I work on my own personal growth and healing. Today's guest is Brenda Bash Cooper, and I've known her since I was about 12 or 13 years old in the church where I grew up in Des Moines. But I know her much better now through Facebook and talking with her about this episode. So I'm excited to introduce her to you. It's funny how those childhood relationships, come back around nowadays with Facebook. Welcome, Brenda.
Thank you, Beth.
Yeah. And Brenda was very excited about the episode we had a couple of episodes ago with Stan DeWitt, his adoption story. And Brenda is also adopted, and so is Joey. And I think there's just a lot to dig into with adoption. And I think a lot of people don't understand adoption. They think it's happy, happy, joy, joy. Yay. And it's not always like that, right? So she's going to talk a little bit about that. And I also wanted to let you know, professionally, she is the Director of Programs and Services at Central Iowa Trauma Recovery Center, which sounds like a really intense job. And so I'm sure she'll tell us a little bit about that as well. But she deals with trauma on the daily and her own trauma as well with the relinquishment in the adoption process. So welcome. And do you want to just tell us a little bit about, yourself, where you are, and then we'll go into your adoption story.
Sure, sounds good. Yeah, I'm the Director of Programs and Services. I think it's interesting that I don't know why I'm starting off with my job, because that's not the most important thing about me, right? I live in Des Moines, Iowa. I was born here. I have always lived here. I probably will always live here. And I have 2 kids. So I'm a parent of 2 teenagers also. Mm-hmm. One of them is just about to enter her 20s here in a little bit. I have 2 bonus children through my second marriage. I have, for my entire career, worked with victims of crime. I started doing that at a county attorney's office as a victim witness coordinator, and then worked as a violent crime counselor for several years after that, before getting the job where I am, where I'm still, continuing to work with people that have experienced crime-related trauma.
Mm-hmm. Wow. I just don't know how you do that every day. God bless you. It's such a needed service.
I meet people on not their best day.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the blessing of the job, right? Because you get to see people recover, you get to witness the resilience of the human spirit. And so it really is, people say that to me a lot, like, oh, I don't know how you could do your job, but it's so rewarding to watch people, how our bodies that are built to heal do that, and how you do that in connection with other people. So it's really a beautiful job too.
Oh, I'm sure you're very, very needed and valued and loved where you're working. And thank you for all of that you're doing for the community. Well, so you were adopted, and why don't you just tell us the basics, how old you were and that kind of thing?
Sure. I was 5 days old when I was adopted. My adoption was completely closed. The story goes, my parents, they were working with their doctor on fertility issues. And they said to him one day, well, we got on a list for Lutheran Social Services. And he said, well, I might have a baby for you. Mm-hmm. And they were like, oh, okay. They figured that it would be some time, And so whereas some of us have gestational periods of 9-10 months, they had 48 hours. And so that's all they had. They got a call very soon after that discussion that there was a baby. And so that actually comes, transition. Yeah, it actually comes into play later on in the story as I kind of found out, what was happening on the other end of things. But this particular doctor delivered me, and he also delivered both of my children. And so,
oh, wow.
He's pretty special. So I grew up in I guess you'd call it an idyllic situation, right? I kind of won the adoption lottery. That's what I like to say, that I had parents who, there was never a moment of truth in my life where people told me, what you've known is a lie, or that's not accurate. I've always known, a popular book at that time was The Chosen Baby. I think I was read that about 1,000,000 times. And so I grew up with sort of a love and a reverence, respect for my biological mother.
That's great.
Didn't talk a whole lot about biological dad. At one point, my mom wrote a letter to the social worker that did my adoption and was answered back. I was 1 at that time. It was 1974. The letter is dated. And she asked the social worker what, since the adoption was closed, what could she tell Brenda when she asks? And so the letter reads, it looks like the social worker went and asked bio mom different things. And so it was reported like her height and her weight. And there was a discussion about the biological father, that he knew about the adoption, that they had talked about getting married, gave his height and weight and eye color and hair color. And so I knew of the existence of that letter. My parents died in 2003. And so when I turned 25, I do remember going, since I worked in the criminal justice system, I went to the judge who did my adoption. And I was like, I don't know, long shot, but, 25 years ago, I was, you did my adoption. And he asked who, my parents' names were, and he didn't remember. So there've been like little, times where I've tried to like figure out, who my biological parents were. Some of the things, growing up that I noticed are, I didn't know my ethnicity. I didn't have a connection to that. Like my family would be very into genealogy and would do all of these, things. And I just didn't feel quite connected to it. So although I had, the secure attachment, even though I had, all of that good stuff, I grew up with this sense of, I've struggled with not being good enough my whole life, And so as I've grown as I've grown up and as I've studied attachment and as I've, looked into adoption studies and, things like that, just trying to see how adoption and attachment fit together. I should also note that my parents we had foster children in our home all growing up.
We did too.
From the time I was 7 until the time I graduated from high school, we had foster children in our home. And so it always fascinated me, this idea, about kids and attachment and adoption and, what happens there. And so in my studies, and learning about epigenetics, and what happens in utero and the relationship that's built, and I think we talked about before, Beth, just the idea that at some point there's a disconnection. Whether you have the most ideal circumstances, whether biological mother it's an act of love, which is how it was presented to me this entire time, was that act of love and knowing that was the best thing for me, that there's a disconnection there at some point where me as a developing fetus, the stress that she was going through, my brain is developing in that, the cells that are going to become my brain and my eyes and my, all of my, who I am are growing up in that stress soup. And then also at some point, my brain's developing and I'm hearing a certain heartbeat and I'm feeling a certain gait, and I'm hearing a certain voice. And at some point there's a disconnection from that, where you go to somebody and the gait is different, the smell is different, the sound is different, everything's different. And so how much does that play into human development?
Yeah. What's that child think? They don't, they don't understand what's going on. So
right. So that knowledge coexists with this feeling that, I've never been good enough. Is it causal? I don't know, but it certainly could lend to that idea, that I wasn't good enough to keep.
Yeah. Certainly something that Joey deals with regularly. Ooh, that's one of his just core things. He doesn't feel worthy of anything, really. Yeah.
And there's just not anything. I mean, my parents could not have done it better. And my biological mother, I have met her, and, we can get into that story too, but I've met her, and, she did the best that she could with the information that she had. And it was a selfless act on her part, an act of love on her part. But yet there is still just the biology, the chemistry that goes with that disconnection. And so it's a fascinating topic for me, to think about and to think, I wonder if that's where that comes from. At some point as a developing infant, I realized that I wasn't wanted, wasn't going to stay, and have that. And what impact does that have then on my brain development, on my ability to relate to other people, on my ability to regulate my own emotions? How much does that? And of course, it can't be just one thing, right? We don't know enough about the brain, so there's that piece, and how much vitamin D did I have in my diet, plus the attachment here minus this attachment there. It's not a causal thing. And so I also don't want to say, well, I wasn't good enough because look at that, and it's someone's fault, or that it's, that there's some blame there. People could not have done it better. And sort of puts it to me to exist with that knowledge and to do something about it, with it, around it, whatever we want to do. We all have stuff that we need to work on, right?
Yeah. To rewrite those old scripts that you've been telling yourself since before you even had thinking thoughts, to look at it from an adult point of view that's had healing work done and really self-aware, and you go, that's where that comes from. But I'm a grown-up now.
And
now I can understand. But it's so hard. It's so primal, and it's in that base part of your brain that's just like the instinctual. What do they call it? The lizard brain, right?
Yes, the reptilian brain, right?
Oh, yeah.
The downstairs brain. They talk about that. Just that foundational stuff.
Yeah. I think it's interesting because at least when I was growing up, when we were growing up, adoption was kind of an honorable thing to do. It was, saving these children who would have had a horrible life, blah, 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 going overseas like I did. Joey's from Japan, and although Japan is not known for overseas adoptions, it's very few there. But it used to be everyone went to China and Korea, and all of that. And there is, like you said, you had a fabulous life with your parents, and probably your birth parents couldn't have given you the kind of the standard of living or the maturity of your parents that you had, right?
Still pretty confident about that. Yeah.
And still,
bio mom did feel that way. I can't give you what you need. I mean, it really was.
And that was, she was giving you out of that. And so there's that. It's all good. That part's really good. And it just does a number on you. There's something like 40% more adopted kids than non-adopted kids end up in rehab or with substance abuse issues. It's like a staggering amount of pain that is documented, that you can look at. People that are in prison, people that are, all sorts of really tough things. An extraordinary amount of them are adopted. So there's something in there. Yeah. Biology is not a small little thing. It's really something.
It is. The beauty, I think, too, is also the recognition that the brain is pliable, right? You burn some of those pathways, and you most certainly can burn new ones.
Yes.
You can, did I have a secure base? Did I form a secure attachment? I did. And that was a benefit for me, moving forward in my life. The lack of that would have, probably made some major issues in my life. And growing up with children that had, those insecure attachments, those disorganized attachments that caused more struggles, or I know you've mentioned on here before, I think, adverse childhood experiences, and the brain developing, differently in that relational piece. I got the benefit of having an early relational piece. But the beauty is the brain is pliable. It can heal and it can change. I don't know. I think about it in a way, that I'm right-handed, right? Can I learn to be left-handed? I can. Is it so hard and uncomfortable and it doesn't feel right and it causes anxiety and all of that stuff? Yeah. Yes, but I can do it. I can, do that.
Yeah, if you broke your right arm, you could exist with your left arm, right? And your brain can readjust. It takes, yeah, like you said, it takes like, it's frustrating and painful at the beginning, but yeah, it's amazing. The human spirit and the brain it can rewire itself, but it takes effort though. You have to have enough support around you to be stable enough to look at this stuff. If you were not in a stable place and started looking at your adoption trauma, I think it would push you over the edge, right? If if you're not in a safe space to do it. Have you ever read the book The Primal Wound?
No, but I've heard of it.
It's a really it was a tough book to read as an adoptive parent.
Yes.
But it was what really woke me up. A friend of mine told me when Joey was struggling toward the beginning, she said, you know what? I think I remember Joey was adopted. Have you ever looked into his adoption trauma? And I'm like, adoption trauma? What? As the adoptive mom, I'm like, what? I didn't traumatize him. I felt guilty. I still do sometimes. But so I read this book, The Primal Wound. It's by Nancy Verrier. I don't know how to pronounce her name. Verrier. I'll put a link to it in the notes. It is an excellent book, and it helped me so much to understand that you can't just take a child away from its birth parent and think everything's going to just be fine. So, yeah.
Some of the literature I even read talked about, if permanency was established within the first year, that a child would develop as a biological child. And I just thought, that's a long time. And I thought, and even in my case, in 5 days, in the first 5 days that you have a child, how much do you touch them and hug them and kiss them and smell them and interact with them, and I didn't have that, and so.
Do you know if you were with your birth mother for those 5 days or just in the maternity ward?
Yeah, I was not. They asked her if she wanted to hold me and she said yes. And so she did get to hold me and she said that was really, really hard.
Yeah.
It was one of the hardest decisions, of course, imagine. Such a difficult decision for her to make, but felt like, I have no, that was kind of my thing growing up too. I wanted to find her because I wanted to tell her thanks, that it turned out, it worked out, it was good. And so oddly, I ended up finding my biological father first.
Oh, you did? Oh, let's talk about how you had a reconciliation with your birth parents.
Sure. So, as I mentioned before, I didn't really know my ethnicity. I didn't really know my background. Where did I come from? And my parents, both sides of the family, like I mentioned, were pretty into genealogy. And so, could trace the family back for a really long time. And I just was like, well, that's not me. And I would notice, people would be very proud of their backgrounds, you'd have Italian festivals, St. Patrick's Day, people would wave their flags, you have Oktoberfest. There's just all kinds of celebrations around, your ethnicity. And
I grew up with Scandinavian days in Ottawa.
Yeah. And I grew up like my family largely Norwegian, and so that impacts the things that you're cooking at holidays and, all of that stuff, but I knew that wasn't mine.
Mm-hmm.
And so here comes ancestry.com and it's like, hey, you can do this. So I knew that if I spit in the tube and sent it to the people who look at the spit, that there's a chance I could find, but my real goal was, wanting to find that kind of history, that background, my roots, And so the results came back and I am 62% Irish, which is really, it was kind of interesting because, if you asked me on my junior high papers, I even have it written down several times. If there's anywhere you'd like to go, where would you like to go? And I would write down Ireland.
Oh, really?
And so, And so in 2015, I had the ability, this was before I did the DNA. And so I had the gift of being able to go to Ireland and we traveled around a specific part of Ireland. And then I found out when I got my DNA test back that that's exactly the area that my roots are. So I kind of connected to my roots before I knew they were mine.
That's amazing.
So that was kind of cool. But then I was sitting in a parking garage one August afternoon, and I got an email from Ancestry.com, and it said, "We found a match. It's a parent-child match." There's no prep for this. You just get an email that says, "Oh, hey, we found a parent-child match." And I was like, oh,
like in between your ads and your work emails, you have this email sitting there. Ay.
I know. Oh my gosh. And I was just like, holy crap. And I called my best friend, and I told her, and I mean, they give you the person's name. It was my biological dad. And gave me his name. And so I am immediately, on social media, I'm looking up everything that I can about this person, trying to figure it out.
Oh my gosh.
I think I found him, lives in Iowa, has always lived in Iowa, and not terribly far from me, I mean, It was just crazy. So I send this awkward email to this person, and I'm like, I know you got this email too. And I'm trying hard not to sound like a P.D. Eastman misprint, hoping that he'd get the connection of the "Are You My Mother" author,
Oh, so, right.
Because I'm dorky like that. And
I get it.
And I got no response.
Oh no. Did that break your heart?
And I was like, yeah, no response at all.
For how long? Like
almost 4 months.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, I would have been waiting, like after about 5 minutes, I'd be like, okay, where's the email? 4 months.
And so that really caused me to be like, I've never been rejected by these people, right? And I mean, there's that question of, if you go to meet them, that can is open, the worms are out. They're not going back in.
Yeah.
And, the way this very rosy adoption story that I had been told, I've never been rejected by either of them.
Okay.
And so now I'm, 45 years old, and can I handle this?
Yeah.
And it's weird because it's this overwhelming emotion. It's a lot to take in, and maybe more than I even anticipated. There was just a lot. I had so many questions, and was nervous, and then nothing, just radio silence. And so I have a very good friend who, she was like, let me call him. And I'm like, what do I have to lose? I have lived without this person for 45 years in my life. They're a stranger to me, and I can live another 45 without this person in my life. I have a family. I don't have a huge void to fill. So I'm just going to leave it at that.
You rationalized it nicely. Okay.
Yeah. I try, right?
Yeah.
And so she called, and he's like, the person that was described in the letter is not him. So he did not know that he had a child. He didn't know.
So this is a lot like Stan's story.
Yes.
And he was like, perked up about that story.
I don't think it's me. Yeah. He's like, I don't think it's me. I think it's my brother, and he's like, I'm not sure I trust the DNA. Maybe it's wrong saying it's a parent child. I mean, he just was like, no way. So in December of that year, I get an email from him, and he said, I don't know if I buy the parent child thing, but you're clearly family. So, and I sent him this long rambly email about how I don't want anything. I just wanted to tell you that it was okay. Yeah. Just trying to lay out the expectation, so that he's not wondering what does this person want from me? And I don't want to disrupt your family. And I don't want to, I just wanted to know who you were and to tell you that it all worked out. And I didn't think about it really beyond that. Mm-hmm. And maybe just go to coffee or something. And he's like, well, you're clearly family. So why don't we go to coffee? And that's the first time that we met. It was on December 27th of that year. And we just talked for 2 hours at the coffee shop. It was really interesting. So as it turns out, his brother took the test as well. So I kind of joked around and I'm like, well, I have Uncle Dad number 1 or Uncle Dad number 2. I don't really know, which person this is. And as it shook out, the DNA test was right. And we got it figured out. But he did not know then who my biological mother was.
So he had no idea he had a child at all. Mm-mm. Wow. So that opened up a whole can of worms for your birth father. Wow.
Can you imagine for him?
No.
And so here he is, what do you do with this information? 65.
Yeah.
And what do you do with this information?
How do you process that? Whoa.
I know. And I keep asking him, I'm like, how that had to just hit you like a ton of bricks. I knew there was a you, but you didn't know there was a me.
Yeah. The dads are particularly, the dads are the only ones that can have that issue, right? The moms definitely know they have a child.
Yes. Yes. And so, he really was kind of faced with, what are you going to do? And I was faced with, I already have a dad, not looking for a dad. And he's like, I already have a daughter, an only child daughter, so there was an issue of that too. Like, I don't want to unseat her, either. And so we really have had, it's been 3 years now, and we've really had these really great open conversations about this and just really, how we're coming to terms with it and developing that relationship. And it can be overwhelming just in that you have to make space for another person. And I don't know what that would be like if my parents were alive. I don't know that I would do that, because, I have a family, I have a whole people that love me and care about me. I have parents, I have a sister, and so coming around to that, okay, now I have an extra dad, a bonus dad, bio dad. Like, I just called him by his first name for the longest time. And I still, it's kind of hard to like, when do you cross over to, do you call that person dad? I don't know. So that's developing, I guess. So when I would talk to, I have a half sister, and when I would talk to her, who's young enough to be my child, she's so sweet. But I would always say your dad, and I've found that being direct and setting expectation up front has been the most helpful. Like, these are the things that I'm looking for. You can or cannot do that, or you will or won't, or want to or don't. Same with her. I just, or with I have 4 half siblings, 3 maternal, 1 paternal. And I just have kind of left it open to whatever contact that they want to have with me, because I accomplished the goal that I had set. And that was just to say, thanks, you did the right thing.
I bet if kids, that are young, like, I'm thinking like when you're 18, technically you can go looking for your birth family. If you don't have a lot of life behind you, I think that you might expect much more from your birth parents than you do at this stage when you were doing this at 45. That you had worked through a lot of it and grown personally and knew what you needed from them or what you needed to give them. But I bet, do you think that happens a lot with younger people seeking out their birth family, that they're really looking for another parent to parent?
Right. And I think that, growing up with kids who, were removed for cause, there's a difference there also. And to romanticize this idea, the people that placed or had children removed, they have made decisions and choices based on the information that they felt was best. And so it's easy, I think, for when we're younger and our brains aren't fully developed, to think about if this, then that, if this, then that, this could happen. This, what are my best case scenarios? What are my worst case scenarios, and how might I deal with those, and to be well supported through those things, because you just don't know. And in my case, like I mentioned, I had never been rejected by them. This has been this beautiful love story, and now I was facing, what if they tell me we've gone on with our life? Like,
that happens to people.
I mean, especially bio dad, he had no idea it existed. He could have easily just been like,
totally.
I don't know what to tell you.
Don't want to deal with you. Done.
Yeah. Totally, and so I had to prepare myself for that. And even at 45, and even at, having this life experience behind me, there was still some nervousness and more emotion than I maybe anticipated.
Wow.
And so I know that there's an issue of time, as I got older. I mean, I was getting to the point where I was like, I may find that they're dead.
Yeah, if you wait long enough.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, will I have regret? And so I really wanted to clarify my own intentions. What do I want out of this?
Mm-hmm.
And what do I want out of that I can control? So really it was, I wanted to say to them XYZ.
Nice.
And that was going to have to be good enough.
Yeah.
And then I didn't really think about it past that.
Okay.
Because I couldn't plan for all the different scenarios.
Yeah, you have no idea what you're going to get. So you're in touch with your birth father and your half sister on that side. You see them a couple times a year or something like that?
Oh no, we meet like monthly.
Oh, monthly. Oh, really? Okay,
yeah, we were meeting like almost every week for a while, just like it was
when it's exciting.
It was fascinating. Yeah. But we get together about monthly. My half sister lives in another state. And so it's more communication via text. But that was one thing that he did do. He was like, I want you two to meet. So he flew me to her.
Oh,
and I got
that's nice.
Spend some time there, which was really lovely. I will say that I have a best case scenario meeting biological family too, that immediate family. And I really, because they've been so kind to me.
Nice.
And I really have just left it up to them, who they tell and what they, because they have their own story too around my adoption. They have their own life too around that adoption. It isn't just about me. And so I have to let them drive that piece.
Yeah, that makes sense. So how did you find your birth mother?
Well, because bio dad was like, I don't know who this could be. I had a little help. A friend of mine called me one day and said, do you want to know who it is? And I said, yeah. And said, okay. So I'm not quite sure how that all went down. And I know enough not to ask the questions, but a day later, I came back, I got the adoption paperwork was handed to me.
Oh, wow.
So however they got that, I don't know. And I'm just going to leave it at that. I don't know. I don't know. Yeah, but I suspect that they may perhaps know a private investigator or they have some connection somewhere. I'm not really sure. I told you that my doctor delivered me. And
so in his records somewhere, he would have it, right?
My biological mom was his patient. And I remember when I went to him for my own appointment and I said, I understand my bio mom, he knew me right away. And he was like, oh, it's been 21 years since I've seen you. And I said, yeah, I understand my biological mom was your patient. And he said, well, I'd have to check my records, and then from kind of behind the sheet, he says, some people go on with their life and they don't want to be found. And they just, some people just go on with their life and they don't tell the rest of their family they prefer that they're not found. Yeah. And so that really set me back a little bit because I was like, okay, I have this letter and in it says that bio mom agrees to have contact with Brenda when she's older. Yet I have this doctor who I knew was involved in this adoption somehow, telling me, some people just go on with their life and don't tell anybody. And so I really kind of took a break from it for a while. And I could tell that when I would mention it to my mom, she always, I don't know why 25 was the magic number, but she said, when you're 25, we'll help you. Okay. Maybe she knew about brain development, before we were talking about it.
Yeah.
But anyway, when I mentioned it to her, I could tell she was a little bit sad, and so I just kind of let it go. And 5 years later, after she died, it was then yet another 15 before I was ready to, really do this. Yeah. As it turned out, there was a connection between the doctor and my biological mother's family.
Okay.
And I suspect it seems like perhaps I was kind of plucked, like handpicked. Like, I know this couple and this is going to be a good one. And I know you and I care about you. And so I'm going to make this connection.
Not with an adoption agency or anything, just like a informal. Okay.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. So it was interesting how that went. But, bio mom, how did I find out? So I got her name. So I text bio dad and I'm like, does this name ring a bell? Oh yeah, I've known her like my whole life. Tell her I said hi. I'm like, no.
Oh no.
No, that's bio mom. And I got back these capital letters and exclamation points of an expletive, and it was just like, oh my.
So he was still in touch with
Stunned.
your birth mom throughout his.
Yeah.
Oh,
but knew her. Yeah. And so he was just stunned. So I had my friend, who reached out, the let me call him friend.
mhm.
Okay, let me call her. I thought, okay, well, maybe that's easier, going through a third party. And that it didn't go that well with bio mom. She thought maybe she was being scammed.
Oh no.
And so I really was like, oh no, she doesn't want to meet me, have to deal with this. And so then I kind of just came up with, again, back to my own expectation. I just want to say, I want to deliver this message, and she can do with it what she wants after that. So I composed this Facebook message and sent it to her and just left it. And she said, and I mentioned the doctor's name, and she said, when you said the doctor's name, I knew it was you.
Oh, okay.
And that's been a lovely thing too, to hear what it was for her, going through that and get that perspective. And
she really did it out of a loving heart. And
she did. And she was like, I knew that I'd never see you again. I mean, I knew at that time, I might not ever see you again. And that was really hard. But I knew that if you were like me, you'd eventually find me. And so it happened that way. And I was able to tell her, why it took so long and for me to make contact with her. But I don't know if honestly, Beth, I don't know if I could have done all that and made room for all that and those relationships if my parents were still here.
Yeah. Stan also, when I interviewed him, he also waited until his parents were gone. I'm sure that's pretty common. Even if your parents say, like I've told Joy, I'll help you find your birth parents, but it puts the kid still in a position of in between. I'm sure that would feel awkward.
Yeah, I don't want to disappoint you,
Yeah.
And again, this romanticized idea of what the parents may be, and I don't know if at such a young age, before our brains are fully developed, before that prefrontal cortex, that executive thinking that, I can think about the consequences and the future and the planning and, all of that it's a super duper idea. I mean, I just think it would be harder, what you run into.
So you're still in relationship with your birth mom?
I am. Yes. We meet monthly.
And she's also in Iowa still?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. And has been,
Yeah.
Here's a weird little story. I went to a gym and I was doing yoga. And as I was talking with my bio dad, I realized, wait a minute, you went to the same yoga place. You're the guy in my yoga class. Like we did yoga together for months.
Oh my gosh.
Like I remember where his mat was. I remember him from that. And I'm like, oh my gosh, you're that guy.
Do you think you had some psychic connection with him? Like, do you remember any other guys in your yoga class? Like maybe the universe was pointing him out to you, like subconsciously. Maybe. I just wonder.
I made note of him because there aren't a ton of guys in yoga.
Yeah, maybe there are not so many guys. So maybe that.
And what I remember about him is that he was a little bit impatient with the class in front of us, and he was kind of like, can we get a move on here? And I'm like, the old guy's impatient. I tell you, it has just that's been a really beautiful relationship. Yeah. I really enjoy it. And he has just leaned in.
Beautiful.
And not overstepped. Like he wanted to give my kids gifts for their birthday. And he was like, I don't know what's appropriate. And I'm like, I don't even know what to tell you.
Yeah, they don't have a gift list on Amazon for your child.
And so we just found that we have to be really, open, direct, vulnerable, you have to talk about those expectations, and you have to talk about, what do you want out of this? Well, what do you want out of, here's what I want, here's what I'm looking for. And we can alter it later, but this is, fill in those unknowns for each other.
Mm-hmm. Wow. I'm so happy that it's turned out so well for you, and it's been a growing experience for all of you. It's so great.
It has.
Do you think that all of these issues that you've dealt with consciously and unconsciously around your adoption have helped you in your job? working with victims of violence and people who've undergone trauma, or is it completely a separate type of trauma?
I would say that, just the experience and the curiosity about the experience has led me to study more about, attachment. And most certainly, that comes into play when you're working with any kind of trauma, particularly crime-related trauma, or if you're dealing with, childhood abuse, and how the world is, when you experience a crime-related trauma, it alters the way sometimes you view the world as safe and predictable place. And so in that it influences that knowledge, then yes. I think, every experience that we do go through. I mean, I think the death of my parents, probably it was sudden, not violent, but sudden, certainly played. And then I, had the both sudden and violent death of a partner. And those experiences shaped, maybe changed the way I view the world and my understanding of deep grief.
Yes. Yes. So you can be there for your clients and have a lot of empathy and understanding because you've been through some really tough stuff.
Yeah. It takes away some of that we them, because I am them and they are me. I mean, we're people that existing on souls on this planet, breathing the same air. That at one time, Beth's hurting and I'm helping. And the next time I'm hurting and Beth's helping. It's just looking at it from that perspective.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I bet you do an amazing job with your clients and at your work and with your family.
Just try to, always communicate that I care about you, and we all have mess. So in all of the mess that you show up with, that I've shown up with, to just have that unconditional positive regard, if we want to be technical about it, but just that unconditional love for another human being, and try to help alleviate their suffering to the degree that I can, knowing that it's a process, right? Your body has a process to heal. And I can offer some thoughts or suggestions, or, but it's your journey. It's your, it's your story to tell. It's your thing to choose. And I will agree with some choices and not with others, but guess what? They have the life experience. They've shown up with it. They've tried things. They're experts in their own life, right? As we all are.
It's like one of those books where you get to choose where you want to go at the end of each chapter. There are some choices that might be better or worse, but it depends on what you grew up with, what your tools are, what your resources are. And so everyone makes a choice, and we'll never know what would happen if you took the other choice. We just keep going.
You have the benefit of going back and changing your mind and trying it over. Okay, that didn't work, so I'm going to try something different. But in the world of, coping through unhealthy ways, I mean, certainly in my work, you meet plenty of people find what works for them, and really my job is to increase the tools in the toolbox so that there are more options.
Very good.
So if someone's struggling with something, they're going to, we don't want to hurt, and we're going to find that which is effective to take care of that. And so if we can offer up different things to try, I think that's the best I can do. At that, have you thought of this? Have you tried that? Would you try that? Something else first.
And it may just be a seed that you plant, and they'll remember years down the road, oh yeah, that lady told me to try X, Y, or Z. Or they might do it right then and there, and then you can watch the transformation.
Maybe, but there's hope. There's always hope that it can change. It's not going to be fun all the time. It's hard, We all have hard, and we all have mess, and we all have stuff that we wouldn't want broadcast out into the world or whatever. And so it's that lack of judgment and just, I think that's so beautiful. You exemplify that so well, Beth, in your work and in your parenting.
We're trying to just decrease the stigma around it, because the stigmas around addiction and mental illness, it makes everything worse. So we're just trying to do our little tiny part in this little corner of the world to let people know that, you know, people who are addicted to substances are still people with feelings, and you know, they're still in there.
Right.
And and it's not an us and them, like you were saying. It's not, oh, I'm over here and he's over there. No, we're walking together. We're all walking each other home, right? We're just...
Yes. And it's easy, you know, you find that in the world of criminal justice, right? I mean, especially, if you ask a prosecutor, who do you want on your jury on a sexual assault trial? Do you want men or women? You know, in a, like, say it was a male on female assault, you know, so the man is the defendant. Do you want men or women on your juries? And they say, well, I want men. I don't want women on the jury, because women are so hard on other women. If I, you know, well, you broke the girl rules. You know, if it were me, I would have XYZ, you know, and we're so, like, and even in the helping fields, you know, you can see that attitude of we, them, you know, that's sad. Because, you know, it just, there are so many circumstances where just sheer luck, or perhaps an extra, I don't know, you know, I don't know why I didn't end up where somebody else was. There's no reason for it other than whatever happened. And I don't know what, but there will be a time where I'm hurting too, you know, or that I will have made a mistake, or that I will have done something. And who do I want looking at me when I'm coming for help? You know, I want to be that person. Because it will be me. It has been me.
Yeah, we all need help at some point or another, and it's good that there are people like you out there to be that help, and hopefully, you know, these messages of acceptance and empathy can be spread far and wide.
And hope, you know,
there's always hope.
Yeah.
Things can get better. Well, thank you, Brenda. This has been just so wonderful getting to know you so deeply through these interviews, and thank you for sharing with our audience all that wonderful, helpful, inspiring information, and just new paradigms to think about how we can be with each other out in the world, and with our children. You know, it's just really good reminders and good inspiration. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Beth, and thank you for doing this podcast. It's really great.
I'm so glad. I'm glad you're listening in, and glad to be reconnected with you all these years later. Just a note to our listeners, I was so deeply involved in that conversation that I didn't notice our dogs going berserk with our neighbor dogs. So I'm so sorry for all the dog noise in the last part of that episode. But thank you for enduring through to the end. And we're really glad that you're supporting Safe Home Podcast. Please share it with any other families that you know who might have struggling teens, or for whom this adoption message might be helpful. And you can also find us on all the social media avenues. Just look for Safe Home Podcast in any of those search engines. And lastly, if you'd like to support us with a small monthly donation, you can do so very easily through Patreon. You can find it at patreon.com/safehome. And your support helps keep this podcast commercial free. Thank you very much for your support. I wish you all well. And we want you to stay safe.